Hello everybody, namaste. I'm Nuja Tuladar from the British Council, and thank you for joining us, albeit from your homes, maintaining physical distance. This is the third of the series of Our Dream City Virtual Heritage Tour. I would like to wish you all a very pleasant Buddha Jayanti, praying that the world grows more peaceful and compassionate with every passing day. To give you a quick background of the program that is Our Dream City, it is a campaign that focuses on empowering and providing opportunities to youth by engaging them in digital space mapping and storytelling exercises. It focuses on enabling participants with digital tools, arts, and a platform to engage with their community as well as civic processes. The program is designed by Story Cycle, a membership based organization in partnership with the British Council. In 2019, as part of the project, we did a number of mapping and digital storytelling workshops with of Bagman, which resulted in us being able to produce a number of guided tours of the area on various topics, including water systems, sociocultural heritage, etc. So we had been planning on doing a series of tours this year as well, but the COVID-19 outbreak meant that we had to cancel. This also gave us an opportunity to find alternatives in the form of virtual tours, which has in some ways been a blessing in disguise as we have been able to keep working, firstly. And more importantly, this has also helped us create a more inclusive program, I think. To introduce to you our tour leader today, we are being led today by Mr. Anil Chitrakar, who is a social entrepreneur, an author, and a columnist. He was recognized as one of the 100 global leaders for tomorrow at the World Economic Forum in Davos in 1993. He's the founder of the Environmental Camps for Conservation Awareness and the co-founder of Himalayan Climate Initiative. Today, Anil sir will give us an overview of the historic and religious area that is Lumbini, the hometown of Siddhartha Gautam Buddha. We'll look into ancient monuments, stories and myths associated with them, and the current importance. We'll also look into local and international Buddhist ritual practices that are ongoing in the Lumbini region. Um, and apart from that, we'll also look into what else Lumbini has in store for its visitors apart from Buddhism. So along with Buddhism, Lumbini is also rich in nature, and the daily life is, although lesser known, is very important. And there are several heritage sites that are underrated and uh, are lesser known, which could be explored, which are very interesting and very old and have much historic importance. So all this will be done through a master plan designed by Japanese architect Kenzo Tange, which will provide us with a glimpse of how development in Lumini is taking place currently. I have had the honor of attending a physical tour with Anil Chitrakar in the past, and I'm certainly looking forward to this one. Now over to you, Anil sir.
Okay. So first of all, welcome to everybody. It's wonderful, green Kathmandu, very wet. It's almost like the monsoon is perfect. But the point is the COVID-19 virus, basically keeps us all indoors. And so we're going to take this opportunity to mark, the 26th sort of century since the Buddha was born on this very day, which we remember by the full moon of Baishak. And so today is the full moon of Baishak, and we commemorate the birth anniversary of the Buddha. And so I'm going to take you on this walk through Lumbini, but I just want to, basically place Lumbini on the map. And so you can see Kathmandu, you can see Pokhara, and then you can see Lumbini. Now the key, thing about this map is that very soon we will have international airports at all three sites. So Kathmandu currently has one, but then Lumbini and Pokhara both are going to have these international airports. So for those of you who have not visited Lumbini recently, so this is what the international terminal at Lumbini is beginning to look like. Now, don't ask a Nepali when these projects will be complete, because nobody knows. And so if somebody tries to guess, they'll probably be proved wrong. But the point about this airport is that Lumbini is now going to become a hub from where one can visit what we would call the Buddhist circuit. Now, just try to remember, the Buddha was born in Lumbini, and then he meditated in Bodh Gaya, where he attained enlightenment, and then traveled to Sarnath, where he gave his first, sermon, and then at the age of 80, passed away in Kushinagar, and we very often refer to that as the Parinirvana. So these four sites, basically make up the life of the Buddha, and so this airport and the birthplace is going to be a very interesting and very easy and well-connected hub from where you can then access these four sites that are linked to the life of the Buddha. Now, in the same light, if you zoom out a little more, then what we have to also remember is that over the centuries, in the past 2600 years, we have to remember that for 1100 years, Buddhism thrived in Pakistan. And so Taxila, which was probably one of the greatest learning centers, and then Nalanda, which is in India, and then Xi'an in China. So when we talk about Lumbini, we don't want to just talk about the birthplace, but what we are going to remember is that through Lumbini, we're going to access the sites related to his lifetime, but then also we can access basically the great learning centers in the past 2600 years that also basically promoted and conserved the teachings of the Buddha. So if we now go back to the airport, and then we make our way west towards Lumbini, so that's the new runway, and so we're going to basically drive west, and then what we see from the air is what we call the sacred garden, right? So the Lumbini sacred garden. And what you see on the image is basically a Google Earth image of what the 5 mile by 1 mile, which is basically the planned area for the sacred garden, looks like from the air. And this is basically the basis for which a master plan was created. And so just try to remember that in 1967, U Thant, the Secretary General of the UN, visited Lumbini, and then basically came up with the idea that we need a master plan, to develop Lumbini. And so what we just remember is that in 1972, all the way to 1978, a great Japanese architect by the name of Kenzo Tange, started, making this master plan. So in a schematic, form, this is what the master plan looks like. After many years now, most of the construction, that needs to be done is nearing completion. And so basically, if you look at this master plan, you will see it's divided into 3 basic zones. And so the entry point, from Bhairava, as you can see, enters the new Lumbini village. Now, this is where, the Lumbini Development Trust, has its offices. This is where the library is. These are where the hotels are. This is where basically you get all the services. And so the central part is the monastic zone and then the sacred garden. And so our walk inside, the Lumbini sacred garden starts from the Lumbini village. And then we are going to go south. So we're going to head, towards the south. Now, the beauty of the way the master plan in Lumbini has been done is that you will be walking along a canal. And so it's very serene, it's very beautiful, and it really helps you to internalize, the place, the Buddha, and the Buddha's teachings. And so this is the image that you would see as you would look, behind you. So this is basically a picture taken looking north from the canal. And then on the right, you can see, again, a Google picture of that. So now what we have to remember as we walk along the canal is that Lumbini is not just a place, for us to see constructed monasteries, for us to just see the concrete, jungle, but it has been an amazing area of nature and natural beauty as well. So the nature, that we talk about in Lumbini, for example, when we look at the life and the childhood of the Buddha, there is a story of how a cousin of the Buddha, basically shot a bird a crane, and then the Buddha, rushed to the site and was able to basically save the life of this beautiful crane. Now, this story goes back 2,600 years, but the beauty of Lumbini is that even today, all the way from Siberia and Northern Asia, these birds migrate through the Kali Gandaki Valley and they come to breed at Lumbini. And so the fact that 2,600 years later, these birds are not just a story or a fable, but the fact that we can actually see them in Lumbini is something that we should not forget, when we are on a tour of Lumbini. So if we, look around, we see the rice fields, we see the cranes, but then as we walk down the canal, we will also see, the various monasteries that are being built. Now, the point about, the monasteries is that 44 countries have basically contributed their architecture, their unique, building techniques. And so Lumbini is also a place to visit 44 of these very unique, buildings that represent Buddhism in the different countries. So for example, this is the Thai, monastery. And so what we just need to remember is that as we walk down the canal, one side of the canal has Theravada Buddhist countries and their monasteries, and the other side is Mahayana, Buddhist, countries. So for example, you will see the Chinese, monastery on the other side. So what we just need to remember is that Lumbini is not a place, for you to visit, for a couple of hours, but it is probably a place where you could spend 3, 4, 5 days, as you visit, as you learn about Buddhism in different countries, and then also look at how different countries have celebrated the life and the teachings of the Buddha. So let's keep on walking, towards the birthplace. So again, we're back, looking at that, Google map. And so you will see that we've crossed, the service zone, we've crossed the monastic area, and now we are at the circular levee. Now this levee is basically a circular pond. And so when we go to the next image, you will basically see that that levee or that water pond, has basically been designed, both aesthetically, but more importantly, as a conservation tool. And so one of the things that we have to remember is that the Nepali Tarai is basically prone to heavy monsoon. It is prone to flooding, every year. And so the Buddhist, birthplace has to be protected from the water. And so the fact that we've inherited it after 2,600 years, we have to make sure that it is basically conserved for the next 2,600 years. And one threat is water. So this circular pond also drains the whole area of water. And at the center of that circle, now you see, the birthplace and the monuments around it. So let's try to zoom in into the middle of the circle. And then what you will see is, basically two structures. Now, this is basically the Maya Devi temple. So the temple dedicated to the Buddha's mother. And so on the left, you see the image of the temple, before it was excavated. Now, what we need to remember is that unlike many countries, unlike many places around the world, the people of Nepal, the government of Nepal basically, went through the text of the birthplace of the Buddha. And so in the 3rd century BC, when Emperor Ashoka of the Mauryas, visited Lumbini, it says in the text very clearly that Ashoka's teacher, the guru, Upagupta, his name, pointed at a piece of stone and said, Emperor, the stone, that I'm pointing at basically marks the exact, birthplace of the Buddha. Now imagine 2,600 years later, the decision was made to actually dig up the site to see if that stone still exists. And guess what? In 1997, the digging was completed, and amazingly, the stone is still there. And so one of the things, that makes, Lumbini very special is that a 2,600-year-old marker that marks the exact birthplace of the Buddha is there. And so the building, the white building that you see on the right, is basically constructed over the foundation, the original foundation of the Maya temple, and the original marker stone in a bulletproof, glass box, and basically the nativity statue, which is the famous statue of Maya giving birth to the Buddha. So those two things and the foundation of the original temple is saved inside that white structure. And so that makes up, basically the Maya Devi temple. So to the west, of the temple, we see the Ashok, pillar, the famous Ashok pillar. Now, on the right, you see the pillar, as it stands, today. But the most important thing was when Lumbini was excavated, and so when it was rediscovered, let us say, in 1896. So if you look at the script, on that pillar, it is in Brahmi script, and so it was translated, and so it starts with the sentence that, when Ashok, to mark the 20th anniversary of his coronation, visited Lumbini, and so it goes on and on and on. But the last sentence is very important because what the emperor did was basically give a tax incentive, to the people of Lumbini Gram in order to protect the birthplace of the Buddha. And so Lumbini Gram and the people basically saved this site for 2,600 years, basically because they got a tax incentive, from the emperor 2,300 years ago. Now, if you look at the pillar on the right, you will see that only a small portion of it actually stands today. But if you look at the historical records, there is supposed to be a stone horse, on top. And so there will be a time when more excavations will take place, and probably the stone horse that makes up the top of that pillar, will be found. So it's an amazing, place. The discovery of the Buddha's life, starts with his birth. And so this inscription is a very powerful, message both to the world, but also proof of the Buddha's birth, at Lumbini. So let's, move about just a little bit, sort of get on a like a hot air balloon. And what we need to see is what we call the intangible. Now, one of the reasons, why the Lumbini area has been inscribed in the UNESCO World Heritage List is not because Lumbini has the proof of the Buddha's birth, but also because of the fact that for 2,600 years, people have traveled from all over the world, from China, from all over, to basically show their devotion and shraddha, to the Buddha. Now, the image on the right is the offering of incense, but the offering on the left is this famous, butter lamp. So we call it churi, or the tree butter lamp. And so these rituals, have very profound meaning in Buddhism. So for example, one lamp can light many, many lamps. And so it says very clearly that that is the way the teachings of the Buddha will continue to be spread. And so when one light, lights another light, the original light doesn't lose any of its luminity. And so the whole idea of sharing the teachings of the Buddha is a continuous process, and you don't lose anything, by sharing it. But also it is very profound that the butter in the lamp will finish. And so it's an amazing way also to teach people impermanency, because this is not something that we can do forever, because our ability to teach or the ability to pass on this knowledge, will come to an end. So when you travel to Lumbini, there are about 80 different ways in which people show their shraddha to the Buddha. So some offer flowers, some offer rice, some offer, but the point basically is that anything that you offer should be the result of some effort, that you put in. And so these are all results of the effort that people have put into, their offerings. So let's move a little bit, from the intangible to looking at, the whole site, what it looks like, at night. So one of the things we've seen in Kathmandu, in Janakpur, in Lumbini, is that with traffic, with other, congestions, these sites have become very attractive, places for people to go at night. And so I was there just about, 2 months ago, and at Lumbini there was a group of monks, and they had technology from Italy, whereby they said basically we brought new lights, which do not even attract insects, and hence do not kill the insects and the moth. And so it's really amazing that people will go to that length to light up the birthplace of the Buddha with lights, that do not attract insects even, or the moth into that area. So this is a very serene site of what Lumbini would have looked like, I think, tonight. But it's just amazing how many people visited. Last year on the New Year's Day, the Nepali New Year's Day, I was in Lumbini, and believe it or not, 32,000 Nepalese visited that site in a single day. So it's a very, happening place. It's a very serene place. But what we need to remember is that we need to see a lot more than just the birthplace. So let's, move a little more and then see what else, Lumbini, has to offer for us. So this is like, getting on a hot air balloon. And so towards the center of the map, you see in red, the word Lumbini. And then if you look to the left on that map, you will see Rupendehi, and then to the further west, you'll see Kapil Bastu. Now, before you reach Kapil Bastu, if you follow that yellow line, from Lumbini towards Kapil Bastu, I hope you see a place called Kudan, Kudan. And so what you need to remember is that Lumbini is not just the birthplace of the Buddha. So the ruins that you see here are related to a story and part of the most profound part of Buddhist history, where, the king and the queen, basically the Buddha's parents, heard about the fact that the Buddha had attained enlightenment and quickly sent people to invite him back home. And so this is really amazing, because the Buddha, along with 300 monks, decide to go back, to Lumbini and to see their parents. And then the Buddha stops at the gate of the palace because he doesn't want to be swayed by his childhood memories, that would come in case he entered the palace. And so he basically expresses the wish that they don't want to enter the palace, but would like to stay outside. And so basically the ruler, the Sudodan, the king, basically has a monastery built, so that the Buddha and the disciples can live, just outside the palace. And so this is the ruins. But, when you tell the story of the life of the Buddha, it was in this great hall that the Buddha basically spoke to his parents, spoke to his wife, Yashodhara, and then met Rahul, his son, at this site. And so these are amazing conversations, that are recorded. But these are the, places that we need to visit when we are in Lumbini, because it's not just the birthplace. There's a lot of activities, a lot of things to see, all around. So if you see, in Nepali homes, especially in Kathmandu, you will see that many people, have a collection of paintings, that hang on walls. And this is just one example of what might be hanging on the walls of a typical, Newar Buddhist family. And this painting basically depicts, the journey the Buddha took, on his way back, to Lumbini. And amazingly, you see the snakes, welcoming him, the animals, welcoming him. And so it's very interesting that people are very, strong about saving these images. But then if you were to ask them, do you know where this site is? They may not have heard of the place called Kudan. And so a tour of Lumbini would not be complete unless you basically visited these sites and actually retold, the stories that I'm telling you now. And so, it's just an amazing place for us to visit and to follow. So look at this map again, and then look at all the sites around Lumbini. So there's Devda, there's Ramgram, and then the ancient, city of Kapil Bastu. And so based in Lumbini, you can definitely spend a lot of time, taking walks, taking short journeys to these sites. So it's an amazing, place to be. So let's just go, to finally, conclude this walk. And so for people like me, who have been involved in the conservation and development of the Lumbini area, I just want to, post this picture where you can see me on the left-hand side of the picture. And so this picture goes back almost 32 or 33 years when I was a young engineer, and we had just taken a survey of Nepal from the northern, border, and we had walked, all the way to the southern border. And so you can see my friends and my colleagues, from Nepal and Japan, when we stopped at Lumbini. And so from that time onwards, I have been very active in conserving and developing the Lumbini area. And so today, it's a real pleasure to have taken you on this little virtual tour. And the purpose of doing this virtual tour, of course, is to show that in a pandemic, we don't need to just, stay home and complain. B, we want to make Lumbini accessible to people with disability, people who have basically the, sort of a difficulty in traveling, all the way to Lumbini. Or basically also we can say it should not be an economic or a financial issue where you cannot afford to go to Lumbini, because this new technology allows us to do virtual, tours. So I really want to thank, Saurav Dhakal, who's taken the lead on this, the Story Cycle team, and also the Buddhist Council in Kathmandu, who have enabled us to do this virtual tour. So thank you very much.